Hello, I am Randi Eggum, and I am a BFA candidate as well as a Civitas honor student. And today I will be presenting my senior thesis portfolio and my Civitas vocation project. Over the last 4 years, I have explored how personal identity, the world around us, and our lived experiences shape who we are and what we create. We are a product of all the people that came before us and the world in which we grow up. As an individual who has spent their entire life jumping from location to location, I strive to understand the culture and people I come into contact with. In my work, I combine the ideas of personal identity and worldview into how I interact with the world around me. I am motivated by the pursuit of travel, experience, and storytelling. With every piece I make, there is a layer of lived experience. From my memory or created on site, I'm always trying to truly see a reality rather than a passing moment. I am a third culture kid, meaning I grew up in countless countries other than the one that I'm a citizen of, and I spent my entire life moving from one adventure to the next. In total, I have been to 24 countries and 30 states in 21 years. Over the course of my life, I have developed a deep need to understand the cultures and people and stories that I come into contact with. My senior thesis portfolio focuses on the relationship between memory and experience. When we are able to feel a location in person, it impacts us so much more than observing through a screen. It becomes more than an image, rather it becomes powerful and channels the human experience. My portfolio has evolved from the different countries that I've lived in and the countless histories and stories I've absorbed, trying to find the life and vibrancy within a location or a memory. Not just what is visually there, but what can be felt with the human spirit. Because the world does not slow down for the artist, but the artist learns how to move with it. My body of work is shaped by many influences, my upbringing and a deep appreciation for heritage and folklore. I draw inspiration from 19th century illustration and impressionist painters like Alphonse Mucha, Ivan Bilbin, Van Gogh, and Monet, as well as storytellers such as Beatrix Potter, Jan Brett, Jenny Adams, all artists who blur the lines between fine art and narrative. When I create, especially in plein air, I try to live fully in the moment. I take in everything around me. My goal is to capture not just what is in front of me, but the aura that surrounds a memory. In my early work, I focus on the stories of others, but now I find my own stories unfolding in front of me. Majority of my work has a narrative, sometimes deeply personal, sometimes universal. I combine aspects of both painting and drawing, often using watercolor, ink, colored pencils, acrylic, and gouache. By utilizing all of these elements, it adds a vibrancy and life to my work. In my practice, I use a mixture of techniques. I begin with studies on site, then integrating memory and research to build a larger narrative. Many of my pieces take a form of layered collages that merge observation, symbolism, and personal connection. I also see my art as a response to today's digital age. In a world saturated by AI, I believe there's still power in the human touch. The spirit we breathe into our work is what makes it art, not just production. With living in a digital age, there's also the aspect of connection within social media and our use of devices. However, with the increase of media, people are less likely to truly take in the world around them and live in the moment as humanity had done up until the early 2000s. My work is a way that I strive to pay attention, to remember a moment far deeper than I could with just a photo. I draw on older artistic methods such as traditional craft, historical illustration, folk art, not to replicate the past, but to start a new conversation in the present. I believe that art is more relevant now more than ever because the human soul cannot be mechanized. The themes that run through my portfolio, the stories, the influences, the techniques all speak to one idea. How we grow up directly shapes the way that we see the world and the stories that we choose to tell. My older work still has a slightly more somber aesthetic with neutral color palette. As you can see, the color profile is greatly limited to earth tones and neutrals. These works were often experimental and used various forms of collage and mediums to create a narrative, not one that was entirely personal, but would set me on the path to projects that lay ahead. Along this route, I began to find personal connection in my landscapes, such as with the contemplation of my home and where I've been able to call home over the years. This was when I began to work with the combination of gouache and inks as a combined medium, such as my work, A Life in Reflection, in which I use a 91-inch piece of paper to map out every place I had ever lived. When experimenting with this process, I manipulated atmospheric perspective as well as the point of view to create a work that was cohesive and yet warped in a way that caused the audience to investigate it further. With the development of my practice of plein air or the practice of painting or drawing outdoors or on location, I was able to learn new ways of understanding color in ways I never thought would have been possible. It was with these projects that I began to see my color palette expand, and with it, my visual vocabulary. I am now dedicated whenever I'm able to draw on location for both finished works and studies for larger projects. With these experiments, such as with my Southwest sketchbook, I painted and drew every day for a month as I traveled all over the Southwest to learn from my environment. With these practices, there's also the challenge of weather and busy atmosphere. For example, with my Badlands study, I fought off 15-mile-per-hour winds, but the painting was worth it despite almost losing the canvas and the rocks. As I became more confident in my voice as an artist, I also became more confident in my own personal story. With this, began to create works that centered around my life story and my family. And just as how the plein air works had caused a shift in my creative voice, I began to witness my color palette take a far more vibrant turn as I dived deeper into my childhood and psyche. With my studies, such as When the Party's Over and Wonderfully Made, in which I focus on my childhood experiences and create works that spoke to my younger self and became a very healing process. Or with Where the Creek Flows, in which I work off similar ideas as my continuous drawing, but not only looking at where my life has been, but what my future holds. I began to think about how I see myself and how the people around you influence many aspects of who we become. I also began to reflect on my own personal heritage, integrating elements of what I've inherited into all that I do, such as with my works building legacy and heritage. I directly allude to my Norwegian heritage with the use of rosemalling and my bunad. I also ponder my direct lineage with the collage of my family tree and the portrait of my mother in reminiscence. With the works I've created most recently, I ponder locations that I have visited and that have been amazing adventures. Each one has a story and a memory that I cherish as I contemplate a visual representation that goes beyond what was in front of me, but what I remember as a feeling. With this portion of my portfolio, I have thought about more traditional forms of painting with both acrylic and oils, but merging them with inks for a far more illustrated and whimsical atmosphere. The painting, The Monastery in particular, was a breakthrough work for me as I played with the power of lighting and atmosphere to convey a powerful sentiment. Continuing this idea of places I have visited, I've also been practicing the art of illustration while using watercolors and inks. With these works, I have been able to produce a nostalgic atmosphere that is in dialogue with older senses of illustration, all while using more modern techniques and mark making. I am to make drawings that are inviting and lead the viewer to be welcomed into the world I have created. And at the heart of my portfolio, we have my long-term project that goes hand in hand with my Civitas vocation, in which I have studied various fables from the author Peter Isperiescu, who first recorded many of Romania's oral traditions and fairy tales in the 1880s. The first set follows the story Youth Without Age and Life Without Death, a story of a young prince in search of eternal life and his journey to obtain what he seeks. The second is Fathromos with the golden hair, in which an outsider learns his place in the world as he must face many obstacles to find where he belongs. And the last is Preslia the Brave and the Golden Apples, in which a heroic prince must travel to the realm of monsters to avenge his father's honor. And at the pinnacle of my senior portfolio, I have my book, Romanian Fables, which was created for my Civitas Vocation Project. With the Civitas Vocation Project, you must develop a project independently that reflects the field of work that you're going into. And as my time in college came to a conclusion, I would like to pursue a future in illustration. Ultimately, I chose to create a project that would reflect my interest in illustration, so I decided to write, illustrate, and self-publish a book all by the time I graduate from college. In the early developmental stages of the project, I planned with multiple professors and mentors to see if this would all be possible, setting me on the path to the project I would create. My earliest memories of growing up are from when we lived in Romania. So as a tribute to where my story started, I decided I would produce a book surrounding Romanian folklore. But I faced one problem, as there was little to no information I could find while here in the States. No matter where I looked, there was very limited information available to me, so my family agreed to accompany me as we traveled back to Bucharest over the summer. While there, I was able to conduct all the research I needed and revisit many of the cherished locations from my childhood. We traveled all over the country to include where I grew up in the Transylvanian countryside. We were joined by some of our older family friends who acted as our translators and told us all about their history. I was able to procure all of the research I needed from various interviews, books I obtained, museums, and drawings I did while in the country. When we returned home, I began the process of planning my book. And so, over the course of the last year, I've slowly put together my project that I'm beyond proud of. While balancing my coursework, I dived deeper into the material that I had collected over the summer to produce a modern English retelling of Peter Ispătăescu's fairy tales. I was even able to get into contact with a Romanian author living in the UK to help with the confirmation that I was being true to the original stories. Otherwise, the project included countless days of editing and formatting, whether in the Writing Center or in the graphic design studio, and with the help of my advisor of the project, Isaiah Lindsay. And lastly came the long and interesting journey of publication, in which I worked with Amazon for over a month to finalize my book. As of this April, my book is now published and will be on display alongside the rest of my work, selected for the senior exhibition at both the ID Dalrymple and the Washington Pavilion. Overall, I hope that you have been able to see the world through my eyes for a little while, and I encourage you all to seek adventure and wonder in all that you do. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait to see where graduation takes me.